And we're live. Welcome to a TiddlyWiki community chat to talk about TiddlyWiki on Fission. I'm going to show a couple of slides. Please do go ahead and either use chat or feel free to unmute yourself. We're a small group here and ask a question as we go. I've put together a couple of items that I think we should talk about, but really this is for all of us to go over. So we'll discuss whatever people want to discuss, really is what it comes down to. We'll do the demo with Jeremy up front so you can see what that looks like. And then we'll dig into the rest of the items on the question on the list. Does anyone else have anything in particular that they want to make sure that gets covered that they want to talk about up front? Okay, let's get it rolling, and I will switch us to screen share mode. So the first view of one more cat, along with Space Flag Cat, we now have Spaceship Cat. And that's from Bruno, a illustrator that we work with in Brazil that we love getting this stuff done with. This is roughly the outline of what we're going to cover. There is going to be a little Fission stuff up front. If you've been to some of our other demo days before, you will have seen some of this. So I'm not going to spend a ton of time on it, but it will also be in the PDF of the slides so that we have it in there. So what is Fission? So my name is Boris. I'm the founder and CEO of Fission. We really call ourselves next generation app publishing. It is a tool that is targeted at developers today. We want to keep making that easier and easier and really highlight that everyone can be a developer, a creator, a digital maker. You only need front-end experience. So what Fission does is take away all of the other bits that you need to do in terms of running a server and all the other things that you need to do to host an app in 2021. We're trying to make that TiddlyWiki original serverless a real thing rather than what that means today. Web native is the software development kit that you use to add user accounts, file and data storage to your app. Everything is encrypted. And the way this works, any developer who creates an application, all the data is stored with the user account, not with a centralized developer. So this leads to some very interesting things because any app that you attach to your Fission account, you can, of course, access all of the data from it between any other app. So this is much more like a mobile or desktop app experience. The publishing platform has hosting included, and really the goal is to make publishing apps as easy as publishing a blog post. So non-developers should be able to go in and hit things like an app clone button, should be able to personalize and other things like that. And here's just a little screenshot of Fission Drive that's live today, and it's what we do. We ship an app to basically let you browse your file system. So why do we want to support TiddlyWiki? TiddlyWiki, as we've kind of said, is the original serverless. So in that case, really a very good fit for some of the things that we're exploring. And we want to popularize again and make simpler. And that sort of maker spirit, creator spirit, tinkerer spirit, where many people in the TiddlyWiki community aren't necessarily software developers, but really do program and customize all the time. Use their software and are comfortable customizing it for their needs. Enabling more TiddlyWiki apps. So many people have highly customized setups. Can Fission make it easier to turn these into what we would think of as apps that people can sign up and use those particular versions? And sort of as a meta layer, we've looked to TiddlyWiki as a way to showcase how people can build apps on Fission that encourage people from beyond the TiddlyWiki community to dig deeper and do their own integration. And finally, Jeremy really is quite an inspiring person to work with. So this was a good opportunity to see that he was available and have some time to work with us. So it's thank you, Jeremy. It's been really great so far working together.
And thank you, Boris. Yeah, no, indeed, thank you. My first thing I want to say is thank you very much to Fission for the opportunity to work on this. It's been really fun.
Awesome. And this is over to Jeremy. So I put a few of these notes down and we can come back to it. It is, I imagine this is exactly the part where we'll just dive into all sorts of things. So go for it, Jeremy.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Boris. And I say thank you so much for having me here again. How do I get rid of that? Oh, well. I liked your observation about TiddlyWiki being the original serverless project. And of course, that's now a bit of an embarrassment that we used to call TiddlyWiki serverless in a really literal-minded kind of dumb sense of meaning that you didn't need a server. And that was kind of a selling point. But of course, what it's meant is that for the 17 years of TiddlyWiki's existence, the primary constraint that it's been developed against, if that's the word, is running all as one file in a browser with no server-side logic. And Fission is one of a few platforms for which that's a perfect fit. And of course, it's a very different dynamic from a user's point of view. Technically, it's the fact that these technical constraints are the same. But from a user perspective, using single file TiddlyWiki without a server does require a certain amount of commitment. You have to understand what a file is, where your data is, and suddenly understand that you're responsible for all the things that normally Google and Facebook do to keep your data safe. Whereas a fairly simple lift and shift of moving TiddlyWiki onto the Fission platform, and you lose all of that friction and instead get actually an experience that's actually better than lots of online services in one particular and fascinating sense, which is this aspect of not needing a password. And for one of my other projects, I administer a multi-user instance of TiddlyWiki that runs on AWS, in Lambda functions, TiddlyWiki running in Lambda functions. So it's all great. There's more than 1,000 users now. But an astonishing amount of time and trouble is spent on managing passwords. And particularly, it's hideous friction for people when they first come to use the system. And so I think that's an aspect of the demo that I'm going to show you that's really easy to overlook, but I think is critically important, particularly if you want to see what TiddlyWiki could look like in this very, very streamlined environment that has, in one sense, just popped up, and yet in another sense is exactly what TiddlyWiki has evolved towards, convergent evolution. So without further ado, let me just check I've got the right windows open and screen share. Now, the last time I ran a demo last week, the demo gods were not kind to me, and the thing I had prepared didn't work. So this time I have been making the necessary sacrifices before the session, so hopefully things will work smoothly. Just to point out, the project is on GitHub, and we're really happy to see engagement there. The product lives at TiddlyWiki.Fusion app, and you can see an instance of Motiv and Jack. And what's the name of your cat, Boris?
So this is Space Flag Cat. It hasn't been properly christened yet.
Oh, okay. Well, he's clearly a relative to this is Motiv and Jack, this little TiddlyWiki mascot thing. So this is TiddlyWiki.Fission.app. You visit it in a browser, and if I come to it in a browser where I'm not logged into Fission, which I possibly should have prepared in advance, what you see is a an authenticate button. What happens next depends on whether you've got a Fission account or not. So in this browser, which I think I'm not logged into Fission, I will waste Fission's resources by creating a new account. So, but it's important, I think, to show people how easy this is. So I click the Authorize with Fission button, get taken to Fission. I get the choice of using an existing account or creating an, so I have already logged in. So, okay, this is the other case where, forgive me, I'm not showing you the whole flow, where I have previously logged into Fission in this browser. And so at this point, this is Fission saying, do you want to authorize this TiddlyWiki app to access your data? So that I've shown you there one of three things that can happen when you first interact with the app. And that was one where I already had a Fission account. This one is where I already have a Fission account and I've already granted permission to TiddlyWiki. And here it's showing me my, my Fission drive, but only those bits that the TiddlyWiki application has access to. So it has read and write access to my entire public folder, and it has read and write access to apps, TiddlyWiki on Fusion, and there's nothing in either of those places so at the moment. So I'll start by creating a new wiki, and okay, great, slightly slow loading thumbnails. These are the two sensible choices. This is just pulls down the latest TiddlyWiki from tiddlywiki.com, and this pulls down the pre-release, the what's on GitHub, which is a somewhat riskier proposition. But there's also a super risky proposition at the top now, which is the static publishing edition. And so I'll give it a URL of my blog. Oops. I didn't actually need to type .html, it would have added it for me. And then when I press create an open wiki, it takes me to a new window, still in the TiddlyWiki Fission app, with, you may be able to see here, a path that points to the place in the Fission file system that I opted to store the blog, and another parameter here, the edition, which is, in this case, static publishing edition. And probably overloading my, here we go. So this edition features my favorite CSS feature, which is dangerously flashing elements to remind you that you're living on the edge here. And it's helpful because one often has multiple TiddlyWikis open in multiple tabs, and it's quite helpful to be reminded which is the dangerous one. So I'll start by giving it some details. Something like that, and choose a nice color scheme and create some content. So let's have a blog post, which this is something really obvious but nicely expressed, and we'll also add an image just to show that we can do that too. With too late, I just remembered I do have a trackpad connected, but that's me writing with a mouse. And oh, I don't know if you can see, but as I made those changes, a little thing appeared up there saying save wiki. And so let's actually at this point close the wiki, and we'll reopen it from here just to demonstrate that everything was saved. So I've done a refresh due to a shortcoming of the experimental nature of the code, is that you need to refresh the browser to see the latest changes. And now I can see my blog, and I click on the green button and I'm taken back to it, and we should shortly see, yeah, my amazing color scheme. And in recent, oh, we didn't give the image a good name, my writing. Okay, and yes, that's saved the changes too. So now what I'm going to do is show you, so that's the main, the first thing we did, the simplest sort of table stakes for making TiddlyWiki work on Fission. It means that you can treat Fission just like Dropbox, have lots of TiddlyWiki documents scattered all over it. They can be different versions, sorry, scattered all over the folders that TiddlyWiki on Fission can access. And you can open them at will, have multiple ones open in different windows, and update them as you've just seen. So the next thing I'd like to show you is what we've been working on for the last 10 days or so. So
a question, Jeremy. We've just shown creation of new blank wikis. There isn't anything in the wiki itself. So these are all plain Jane TiddlyWikis, is that correct?
Yes, the options that you see here are what we call editions, which are blank TiddlyWikis loaded with in some cases, plugins and small bits of configuration to give you a sort of off-the-shelf customized TiddlyWiki. And it's one of the things we've wanted to have for a long time in the community, was a central library of these editions. And one of the things that working on Fission has enabled me to do is to jump a gun on that. So this is, if you like, a prototype for a future TiddlyWiki edition library, where I can show you here, we have a little bit of JSON that tells it which URLs to go and collect the editions, plus a hack to go and get the super experimental dangerous one, but that hack will go in due course. And then there's a little bit of JavaScript which reaches across the internet and grabs all of those, and also takes screenshots using something called Puppeteer. So that was something that it was important to us for TiddlyWiki on Fission to have this kind of ease of use, I suppose. And so it seemed, it was obviously important to Boris and something I've wanted to do for a while. So it was a great opportunity to get that done. And in fact, now we're open for pull requests for people to nominate their editions for inclusion in the library. So at the moment, that process is a bit clumsy and manual to get that URL registered in that file. But then once it's there, it will, every time it rebuilds the app, it'll grab the latest version of that edition.
Yeah, and the other, and we'll talk a little bit about editions later that I have a placeholder for. That was great to cover that. The other point that I was trying to highlight was you have done all of this by kind of wrapping this in this TiddlyWiki on Fission app that injects the connection into Fission, but you can take any arbitrary TiddlyWiki file from wherever and anywhere, upload it to Fission, and then it will gain these saving capabilities.
When you access it via tiddlywiki.fission.app. So if I now come here and look in my private folder, where again, maybe I need a refresh here. Yes, I now see an entry for my blog, and I can even get a link to that page, which is that there. Yeah. Oh, sorry, I've done it wrong. Do I have to?
No, you want the. Oh, interesting. Sorry, this is the private file, which you won't. It's in private.
Oh, of course, which doesn't have a link. Does it? Sorry. Forgive me.
Which is perfect.
So I'm sorry, the curse of this demo is confusing myself and the viewers. The point that we're trying to get across is subtle, really. That this is a perfectly ordinary TiddlyWiki dropped into Fission Drive. This, on the other hand, is a somewhat, well, I mean, a heavily customized looking TiddlyWiki, but if I press this button at the bottom, it reveals itself to just be a TiddlyWiki. And so that's powered by a plugin that's currently called TiddlyWiki on Fission. It possibly should be called something more specific to describe what it does. But that has all of these components, like, for instance, there's the create wiki mode. So this plugin is where all of the logic of integrating TiddlyWiki with Fission lives, even the logic that is used here, because obviously this TiddlyWiki that we're hosting, as I pointed out, doesn't know anything about Fission. And this provides some general purpose Fission services, which means using this plugin and its descendants, it would be possible to build much more, well, very different TiddlyWiki based Fission applications, custom applications that went beyond what you see here. And that's also something that we want to foster as much as we can. So if I get...
Question from Abraham, and I'll just repeat the questions that are done in text so that we can capture them on the audio as well. Are the tiddlers stored as TIDs or JSONs or HTML in the backend?
So in both cases, you're dealing with a single TiddlyWiki file. So here, this tiddlywiki.fission.app, if it was, is actually that, and a single self-contained TiddlyWiki that contains this additional plugin for doing the magic with Fission. Whilst this one is kind of the whole point is it's an off-the-shelf well, except it's an experimental one, but it's an off-the-shelf TiddlyWiki standalone file. So we do want to support .tid files for loading tiddlers, and that would be one of the services that this will grow to accommodate. Does that answer your question, Libra?
It's definitely an area of interest to mine. I think there's some interesting things that can be done with individual TID files. And again, in this serverless mode, well, in a browser, we do have access to essentially a file system that's attached to your browser. And that means that we have a building block to do much more. But this first sprint was to say, can we take an arbitrary TiddlyWiki file, drop it on Fission, and then get this kind of live saving and live publishing in either public or private mode? And that's what we've completed now. So it's a great point. I'd actually also like to see possibly some interesting things around mixing public and private for different TIDs. There's all sorts of possibilities. You've essentially got a file system that is attached to your browser. So anything that you can imagine that one might do with a file system is a simple matter of programming, right, Jeremy?
Yeah, and I'm very interested in what we can do in a multi-user context.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think Fission may be able to support both the models that I would be interested in. One is where you've got a group of people who trust each other who are editing the same wiki at the same time. And the other is where you've got people who are a bit more disconnected who are forking each other's content, and then a mechanism for pulling it back in again, a kind of federated discussion. And obviously the second one would be terribly easy to do by dropping JSON files in the public folder. But let me very quickly just drive through the rest of the demo, which was so far we've taken a dangerously experimental blank TiddlyWiki and we've created 2 tiddlers in it. and we've verified that changes have been saved to the Fission filing system. What I'm going to do now is publish it as a static site. So this is a TiddlyWiki core feature that is now under development. So again, rather like the edition library, part of there's such an overlap between Boris's vision for what he wanted to do with this project and the things that we've wanted to do for a while. I found in GitHub a ticket from 2016 where I basically described my desire to do the work that I am now about to show you. So, you know, for all of us, I think it takes a little prompt to get things done. And, you know, in this case, the prompt is the support of Fission, which has really made a difference to these two things that the community has been keen to get. So this is an unfinished user interface for defining how the content of this wiki should be exported as a static site. And that's something that TiddlyWiki has always supported, but in the past, it only worked under Node.js. And worse than that, it required sort of mangling the command line. Essentially, doing complex stuff required you to understand bash escaping. So part of the easy part of static file saving on Fission is the very simple APIs, nice clean APIs that are provided for writing files. Making a framework so that we can have a coherent user interface to do that entirely within the browser has been the bulk of the work so far. And it's a substantial piece of work, and it's not finished, and it probably won't be finished in the context of this engagement. But it is a big improvement that TiddlyWiki has needed for a while. So here I can, this is a particular job I'm looking at that has been predefined. And there will be a mechanism for adding additional ones. So I can choose the publisher module that I want to use to publish this content. And different publishers have a different user interface. In the case of Fission, it asks for the base path. So that's where it's writing to in the Fission filing system. And then down here, you've got 4 boxes, which each represent what a web server would call routes. There, you can imagine those as wildcarded file paths. So, forgive me, this first one, which is saving the images, is using TiddlyWiki's filter notation to say, give me all the tiddlers that are images. And then this completely different notation is saying, for each of those tiddlers, generate a path that consists of what we call a slugified version of the title, which is, making it lowercase and URL friendly. And in the case of images, the extension corresponding to the image type. And we do that because when you save static sites when you view static material on a file URI, the browser needs the correct file extension on the image. It gets unhappy with extensionless images. So it's the same for each of these. The subtlety is that some of them are saving a whole bunch of tiddlers, so there's a whole bunch of images being saved. This one is only saving a single file, which is the TiddlyWiki file itself. And then for each of the non-images, it's saving a static HTML representation as well. And it's also saving a style sheet. So the expectation is that all of that stuff in green would be collapsed down, and it would just say standard static site configuration. And you'd be able to choose other site configurations from a drop-down menu. So the expectation is that it would be, say, some expertise to tweak, to tweak it, to make it so it saves images to a folder called images 2 is kind of easy, but to change the images and the way that the HTML links to the images, that's a bit more involved. So in the future, that would mean that all you would need to do is set your that's roughly my base name. I know it's not exactly. It doesn't matter though, Boris. It's all right. So all I'd need to do is that would pre-populate the base URL because it knows the base URL, and I would just choose this pre-existing set of roots. Okay, so with that elaborate explanation, I now actually let's just drop in some more tiddlers. So I'm just going to open a copy of TiddlyWiki.com, and over here, if I drag that wasn't very helpful. If I drag that, yeah, that'll give us a whole bunch of additional tiddlers for the export. They're just ones from the main TiddlyWiki site. Okay, so now
I mean, I feel like I just have to mention that for other people who are watching this, possibly afterwards, you know, this is a natural TiddlyWiki ability where you can drag and drop content between web pages on different servers. That's what it means to be serverless, and this is all built-in functionality.
Yeah, no, it's true, but because all the data is client-side, it's really easy to drop it onto the payload of a drag and drop operation.
Just a short 17 years of development, and everything just works, right, Jeremy?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's 17 years of carefully tracking browsers and working around the fact that you know, our use cases are not the primary focus of browser makers. You know, yeah. It shows a lot of the time.
Anyway, amazing. I just really wanted to celebrate that again, that we've done this sleight of hand that works, that it's something amazing that TiddlyWiki does, and I can't wait for more people to experience it.
Yeah, no, likewise. I mean, by talking through it, I've rather ruined what should be a 3-click demo, because anyway, I'm now going to press this publishing icon, and as I do so, a status thing comes up, and that's one of the things that we had to add, was a means of doing these long-running tasks without blocking the user interface. And there's just at the moment an alert as feedback. And in fact, it does, if we go into the into here, it has given me an empty report about the publishing, but that's where there would be some information presented in the user interface telling you how many files have been published and so on. So now we can go back to probably Fission Drive. Oh no, let's go back to TiddlyWiki, and you'll remember the last thing we were doing destroyed things by going behind the scenes and looking at the TiddlyWiki user interface. So now I've got, as before, my blog is still sitting in my private folder. My public folder now has an index.html, which is a public copy of that same wiki, and in a public/static folder, it's got a whole load of output HTML files and the CSS. So if I choose one of those which I know has some writing in it, I suppose a blog post, and well, I can see a typo in that, which suggests that I messed things up. Okay, so I messed. The demo gods weren't kind after all. So here, finally, I'm viewing on my on this static domain name that's linked to my personal Fission account. So you've seen here tiddlywiki.fission.app. So although I made that, that's a sort of public thing in the cloud, so to speak. This is my particular user account, and I could spin up another of these just by creating another Fission account. Boris tells me that we're going to get rid of that P, and the rest of it is the URL that was generated by TiddlyWiki. And let's also just, we can also see my image if I make the same correction.
Yeah, there's a few other things in there, Jeremy. We should these are all good things that we'll add as issues. We should generate a 404 file
Yeah,
in there
yeah,
as well, and then that'll just work.
yeah.
Yeah, so there's a P, and then in fact, I think there's where it says Germaline.files. I think we can get rid of that .files as well.
Oh, yeah.
So it'll just basically be your username.fission.name will be the root of your public folder. I believe we can get to that. And then basically you'll have what is a pretty nice clean thing that you can access, and just, it serves up regular HTML from the system that way. Anything that's in your private folder is fully encrypted and can't be accessed basically when you're not online. So you can essentially have a private TiddlyWiki that you use as the back end of something that you then statically publish, or for SEO and other purposes, you could have a public wiki that in turn you publish. And there's a couple of other ideas that we have around making it so that you can add custom domains rather than just this username one, but that's a good start.
Let me can I just very quickly, conscious that I'd like to just show how fast this system is. So I open my wiki. I'm going to edit this blog post. So I've already got the blog post open, and it's just simply to show that I go in here and I'll make everything in a big font. It does the save automatically. Click the button, bang, bang, and subject to the speed of my Wi-Fi. Those files all go. So, and I could be doing that on my phone. And so now when I refresh that, I should get the presumably update. Well, maybe the browser's caching it, wouldn't be surprised. Okay, it hasn't had a chance to refresh for some reason. Let's do it again. So, just to show that there's no faster way that I know of to get a TiddlyWiki updated online and to automatically do that static site publishing from a standing start from anybody on the planet standing in front of a reasonably recent browser, whether it's on a mobile phone or a desktop.
Question from Walt. Is this publish feature available? If so, where can I access it? If not, when?
So you can try it out now on tiddlywiki.fission.app, but it will gently discourage you from doing so by presenting you with these eye-bleeding banners. And I must say, sitting in front of a big monitor with these, I wouldn't spend much time working on it. But no, in all seriousness, well, it's actually easy to experiment with this stuff. If you set up a wiki, if you know how to use TiddlyWiki, set up a wiki that you trust the saving mechanism, and export your content, using that drag and drop technique to the Fission app in order to try it out. I think we're close to the point where we can take off this warning, but at the moment the warning is really serious. TiddlyWiki is intended to help people with address the most intimate parts of their lives, and so data loss with this is, to me, it's the worst kind of data loss. It's the equivalent of losing irreplaceable sentimental old photos. And so as a developer who knows how fragile all of this software is, I feel it's very important to say, to just warn you that this is a fast moving experimental service at the moment. hopefully over the next 2 or 3 weeks, it'll settle down. And certainly when you see this banner disappear, then you'll know that I'm personally more confident that people can trust what I have done. So it's not, and this isn't even to cast doubt on Fission, it's that there's, on top of Fission, I've plonked TiddlyWiki with a whole load of, not to say rickety stuff, but experimental is the word I'd prefer. Yeah, caution is indicated.
Question from Walt, compare and contrast with how TiddlyHost.com works.
Brilliant comparison. TiddlyHost is a straight up standard Rails, I believe Rails-based web application, and a beautiful one. And it's really smooth and polished, and it does the things that you would expect a TiddlyWiki host based on that model to do. You go there, you register, you get a username and password, and then you can maintain a list of wikis. Those wikis can either be private or public. Very familiar list of features. And the difference really with Fission is that Fission's way of thinking about what you're doing is less of a sandbox. When you put a wiki on TiddlyHost, it's a standalone thing on a shelf on the internet that people can access. What we've done with TiddlyWiki on Fission is to bring TiddlyWiki to a whole sort of fabric that's moldable, that allows us, developers and end users, to build their own stuff. So that's a long answer, but saying a strong recommendation for TiddlyHost. From an end user perspective, Fission is technically different in these arcane ways, being based on IPFS and stuff. What that actually means is actually conceptually quite easy to grasp. It's the consequences of a filing system that is shared between apps, and the vision of cooperating apps that are updated by their own app maintainers that I, as a user, bring together in the context of my Fission filing system. So you can think of Fission as a place to publish, but also a place to work, a place to think, where for many people, TiddlyHost would be a place to publish. And that's one of the things that it excels at too. And so to underline, again, the password thing. I mean, as soon as, it won't be soon enough when we can move everybody onto passwordless technology where that exists.
Yeah, I'd say another thing is it's a lot of effort to run a hosting service. And so part of Fission as a tool for developers is saying, what if you didn't have to run all of this machinery to create something like TiddlyHost? So that is something that Fission offers, where we've designed it to make this meta platform where anyone can build their own SaaS business, but in this way that that all of the data remains with the user. So that's really how we're looking at it. It is a very different model, and we're blending what's possible for both end users and developers here. But rather than just one TiddlyHost.com, what if there were 10 of them, because the barrier to entry is that much lower, and each one could be customized. That's how we're seeing it, and lots of other technical changes as well that we're exploring. That's a bit different, basically, at the end of the day. Walt has another question. Can it support local first data storage, then replicated to Fission Cloud? So that's basically how Fission works. So what's happening under the covers is you have a user account that's linked to your browser. Your browser essentially contains a private key. That's why it doesn't need a password. It's how it knows you're you, and that's how you link between different devices and browser instances. We bundled all up for developers so that when they're using this, it mixes and matches with local storage. So things are cached locally. Jeremy was trying to demonstrate speed. We do all these things in a fairly decentralized way, so things can work offline because it is cached in local storage. And then when you come back online, it can sync or publish back to Fission. And that's part of the offering that Fission does, is we keep your stuff online and we keep it backed up. The local cache is something that you can dive into. Jeremy's in developer tools here.
Yeah.
And it's not really a user accessible area. There's a few other pieces underneath. Jeremy mentioned the interplanetary file system, IPFS, that we're based on. So you can technically actually host the data yourself if you know the address of your stuff, and it has a unique content address. Yeah, Jeremy's showcasing all of the different places where browsers keep things.
Yeah, that's great. What isn't at all obvious, but that little sign indicates that I've switched the browser using developer tools to behave as if it's offline. I was once on a Zoom call where I tried to demonstrate being offline by turning off my Wi-Fi. You only do that once. So I'm pseudo offline. I am typing while I am offline, and you'll see here in a moment the saved wiki notification has come up, because that just means that TiddlyWiki has spoken to Fission, and that Fission has securely and robustly stored the stuff in this local storage. And so now, not that I've ever done this before, but if I come back online, right there, you can see Fission's woken up and is talking to itself, and presumably, hopefully, updating that that last thing that I just wrote, that I just typed.
Yeah. So that name there is the unique identifier of your file system.
And this is stuff beyond my pay grade, but going on that. So now what I'm going to do that's brave is I saved that tiddler while I was offline. Now I'm going to close the tab, go back to the editor and reopen that one, and just check that the one that I edited offline works. So it did. So that's the kind of benefit of marrying two platforms together, that I had an abstract awareness that this stuff was supposed to work offline, and by observation that it should work offline, but I'd actually not bothered to try that so far because I was certain it was going to crop up at some point and we'd get to it. And of course it just works. And that's really the hallmark of what's fun about these kinds of integrations, because these are both very rich systems that enable a very fascinating kind of creativity. So it's as if you multiply things together. I think that's sort of the cliche about these things, isn't it?
Yep. Amazing. Jazz hands. Thank you, Jeremy.
My pleasure. Let me unscreen share.
Okay. So there you have it. This TiddlyWiki on Fission is a bit like Tiddly Desktop on the web, where the big functionality of it is this Fission plugin, and that's in the GitHub repo. We've got this pick an edition to create and launch. Browse your file system to launch existing wikis, and you can go in and you can upload literally any TiddlyWiki that you have kicking around, because of this wrapper of TiddlyWiki on Fission that adds the pieces to talk to the Fission file system that's connected to your username. And then finally, static publishing. And to reiterate, these are the types of things where they make sense in the context of Fission, but they're a TiddlyWiki core feature. Then in working with Jeremy, we agreed, this is a great, we should spend our time that we're contracted to put together. And obviously it doesn't need to be built in a Fission specific way, because that's not what we're about. We will really want to support these capabilities at the TiddlyWiki core that just happen to work really well in a Fission context. Jeremy already went over this in a little bit. So the thinking of this is we have this opportunity where we have one central spot, tiddlywiki.fission.app. We could do a custom domain for it, but in many ways it's like, let's just use the subdomain feature that any developer gets right now on Fission. We'll manage TiddlyWiki on Fission as an open source project. It's on GitHub. You don't need to be a developer. So we've got the TiddlyWiki app forum on Fission's forum. You can post there, you can post an issue, or if you're a developer, feel free to make a pull request that says that you want to add to this bill of materials JSON file. You can see we really just need a name, a description, and then having that URL anywhere. And so we think that this is non-developer friendly. You don't have to learn any fancy tools. If you can come up with a public web accessible file path, then you can include an addition. So lowering the barrier to entry to say anyone can create an addition, and then direct them to say, go to tiddlywiki.fission.app, select myself from the dropdown, and you too can have a copy of this. And mix and match in all those other different ways. Yes, you could publish this on Fission. So you could literally just stick this in your public folder and have a direct link to it. And as you update it and work with it with TiddlyWiki on Fission, right? Like all of this stuff all works together because we're just using web addresses for all of these things, along with some of the stuff underneath. Does anyone have questions about this sort of way of including additions? We're kind of going through a lot, which I know. So hopefully we can talk more about this in the forum and on the mailing lists afterwards as well. One more experiment. So I talked about this with Jeremy early on. Fission, is contracted with Jeremy. We're paying him to do work on this. What we really wanted to do was engage and look at what long-term support is and what it means for broader community participation in a number of different ways. This was my suggestion. I'm helping with this experiment, Boris, and myself as Fission. This is a vision that Fission has of having users pay and support for apps, whether they're open source or not, to connect directly with creators as a model. OpenCollective is itself an open source platform, so it's a company, but all of its code is open source. And they're a platform for gathering financial support and very specifically for having open finances. I encourage people to check it out. There's lots of great stuff on there. I want to do more with it. I support a number of things on it and I run a number of things on it, including actually our co-founder, Brooke. She runs a local meetup that she needed to collect funds for. And that's the example of the types of things on there. So the question that we have, can we gather funds from the community and then pay other members of the community with those funds for all sorts of things? Do you want to commission custom designs? Do you want to commission developers to create new plugins? So that's our intent, is that we'll run some experiments through this. Effectively, Fission is the first sponsor of it. And we'll be essentially asking people to contribute. I think what we'd like to do is look at this as an experimental space, and it can be used for anything large or small, and really over to the TiddlyWiki community of what you want to fund, what you want to see exist in the world. Do you want to add anything to that, Jeremy?
Oh, sorry, I'll unmute myself first. Yes, again, a bit like the edition library and the publishing framework, exploring exploring the community's need, or whether the community needs a mechanism. I don't like all the words. Sometimes needs a mechanism for paying each other, basically, and so maybe there's some activities within the community that could be enhanced with a little business model, to put it in in startup terms. You know, and the business model that OpenCollective supports is a really nice one that I think recognizes that for most people, contributing to open source isn't about the money. It's about the recognition and rewards that you get from other people recognizing your work and using it. And I see that all the time, the way that, obviously I get that myself, I get enormous satisfaction from that, but I also see in the community, people who launch new editions and plugins, they justifiably are bursting with pride when they announce them in anticipation of, the reception that they hope to get, and usually do get. We're a friendly, nice community. So in one sense, that is the currency of, I think, open source projects like TiddlyWiki. I'm aware there are many that exist, solely via corporate sponsorship, but TiddlyWiki is a very grassroots project. But so against that backdrop, the idea of being able to, I don't know, again, I feel like using these awful words like incentivized, but to the extent that money can provide an incentive and a reason, and can give us a mechanism for setting up obligations between individuals, I think that could be a useful framework for us to get stuff done in a more purposeful way. And in the TiddlyWiki community, people are drawn from all walks of life, and people often have some other aspect of their life to which they would like to apply TiddlyWiki, but are constrained by their technical skills. So those kinds of cases, I think you could really see how a mechanism could help. And OpenCollective is a super popular one right now. And as Boris says, the transparent way in which they talk about their goals and manage their operations is really inspiring. And they you can't see it here, but OpenCollective encourages projects to do your accounting in public, basically. So that's something I've seen over the last 10 years, I guess, growing up more and more, this idea that companies can be radically transparent, and it's open to question whether companies can be, but surely communities should be. Everything else about TiddlyWiki is entirely transparent, after all. So sorry, again, long. Thank you for the invitation to speak. I took it and ran with it.
No. This is the kind of stuff that we have to capture and talk about. And I think especially bringing money into open source, it may seem strange. My own reflection and my very long history with open source, for me, where I am at right now, we talked about corporate sponsorship and so on. There's new open source licenses coming up that aren't the ones that have been around for 30 years, that recognize that maybe we don't want corporates profiting off everything very directly. So that's a thing that's happening. And then the other thing that I've really internalized is I have been very, very lucky in my circumstances, my privilege, that I've been able to take time and contribute it to creating open source. Other people are not able to because they need to spend their scarce time getting paid for it. So very specifically, I'm thinking of other areas around the world as well. So that's the loop that I'd love to see is, can people make an income that can get paid to put time towards things who normally wouldn't have time or privilege to be able to work on open source?
Yeah, no, exactly.
At a very small scale.
I feel the same. I mean, for me, you know, the journey of the last few years has been to get to the point where I support myself through work on TiddlyWiki, which I've now accomplished. And yeah, the next stage, I think, is to try and to use that position to pull up other people as well, to the extent that they want to. There is certainly the potential there. There's amazing talent in the community.
Yeah, exactly. I've kept this little, quite sparse. You know, I have this kind of backer monthly or backer annual that I have set up on OpenCollective. Please go ahead and back it if it's something that you're interested in. Basically, this is all an experiment. And we want to talk with early backers and basically shower you with badges and accolades, and also say, okay, you know, what you want to do floats to the top of the list. What do you think we should do? I put one example where I know Jeremy likes to do the scribble on a page. Because we have a file system, there may be something interesting whether we put that on the Fission plugin or elsewhere, where we do this mode where people can do file uploads directly to the file system on the back end that would fill in the canonical URI. And you've got these tiddlers that created like that.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah.
not
there's a bunch of things along those lines. Being able to scan an existing folder of images and create those canonical URI tiddlers. Yeah.
Great.
Be really handy.
In fact, that would be a really interesting and valuable way to take files that you've already plunked down in your Fission drive and kind of annotate and work with. So,
exactly that.
You know, my screenshots, I always use Fission itself for screenshots of Fission, so that would be really cool. After I had a look at some of the GitHub discussion forum and elsewhere, you know, the two things that are kind of in motion already is some of the discussion about community plugins, and then, you know, an upgraded forum. I run a bunch of discourse forums. Professional hosting costs about $50 US per month. So like that's a very direct cost that someone would have to soak up $50 a month. So that's an example of something where we might put that on there as a goal and say, hey, let's actually kick off talking about what a new forum for TiddlyWiki looks like. And maybe we'll use discourse, and that's about $50 per month. I'm suggesting it and putting it out there. This is very much in the hands of Jeremy and the core TiddlyWiki community. I'm here to help from my perspective of a longtime person who's worked with a lot of open source and community. And we have a lot of tools essentially that we can experiment with to accomplish some of these goals.
Yes, indeed. The rallying the OpenCollective stuff around an obvious external fixed cost seems like a really nice, clean way to get started.
Yeah, it's very clear then that your budget is $50 a month, and that needs to get covered in some way. So we would need, you know, at least 10 people. I think there's probably room for other things as well in there, whether it's donations or sponsorships in the form of thank yous. You know, where the bulk of the work, other than the hosting costs, really will be the people power that TiddlyWiki already has, of saying, okay, who's going to help be a moderator? Who's going to be an admin? How are we going to manage this? How are we going to set it up? Which is the real cost.
Yeah.
Awesome. Other questions, comments? These are the links for everything. Everyone who's signed up, I will send out an email afterwards. I've got a few other slides in here that are just in the appendix so that I have them in the PDF about how Fission works and a few other things like that so that we have them. I am going to stop this. Questions, comments?
Sure. Hi, my name's Steve. Hi, Jeremy. Nice to see you. And sorry to be late. I've missed the first few minutes or half hour of this group, but I wanted to introduce myself. And I got to say, I really don't know exactly what Fission is, which is okay. But I know what TiddlyWiki is, and I just wanted to suggest along the lines of funding. I'm at a university. I teach, and I teach in a platform that teaches TiddlyWiki, and I would love to figure out, and Jeremy and I have been talking for years about how to do this, but how do we convert some of the money that my students pay as tuition into ways to support the TiddlyWiki open software, open source community? And it's a tricky thing, but not an impossible hurdle. So when you're talking $5 a month, I could see making that a course fee for my students. And although it's not going to generate a lot of students, but if we still, it's an income floor potentially. And so I just wanted to throw that out there. And TiddlyWiki hasn't, in my understanding, hasn't made a lot of headway into the university community. But you know, at least I try to teach people using the platform, and would love to figure out ways to expand that. And I've probably put stuff out on the list various places, but you know, feel free to visit designrightstudio.com. It's very out of date, but it really is. I'm really interested in, and we're starting up again this summer. And really interested in figuring out ways to teach an open source platform in an open way. Jeremy, I have a new motto. We're going to teach all the world to write hypertextually.
Yeah, exactly.
So a small, just like Google, it's like, you know, the Internet Archive captures all the world's content. We're just going to capture all the world's writers and teach them all to write hypertextually. So I just wanted to throw that out there, and would certainly be interested in hearing what you all have to say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a great idea. It's the exact sort of thing with the OpenCollective tooling. You know, literally we could have another section there that says, you know, course fee students, or however exactly it works, right? I would suggest making it as close to the user as possible, where then part of that is onboarding them into those other community spaces. I think in TiddlyWiki in particular, there's these loops that you can generate of using the tool, connecting to a community, and especially with that drag and drop. And it's exact kind of thing that putting the flair out there of saying, what other universities could do this model? What other course fees are there? What does this look like? You know, if it's 100 students at $5 a month, that's something that someone could maintain a corpus of information on a monthly basis as a part-time job. And I say that as a part-time job from our Western's perspective. $500 a month would be a good income in many places around the world.
So one of the things that the universities offer, and you know, having spent a couple, I mean, most of my life has been spent as a professor, and I have all sorts of ideas from there. But as an administrator for the past couple of years, I understand a little bit about money flows now. And the easiest way to get the academics to pay for something is to give them students and let them teach. So I could imagine, you know, hiring TiddlyWiki teachers, professors from around the world to participate in the class. And it's easy for me to hire teaching assistants and professors, and because that's what we're used to do. Hiring someone, you know, on a course fee is a little more challenging, but certainly if we're providing them a platform, students are used to paying a fee, amazing amounts of money per semester, you know, $50, $100, $200, $300 per semester to be able to learn in an environment. And I think that would be really interesting to see if there was, you know, if we could build out TiddlyWiki as a teaching environment. And I don't think we want to compete with Blackboard, but we want to provide something for students to do and charge them money for it.
Steve's been pioneering teaching with TiddlyWiki since 2006. I remember Steve wrote a book on the impact of the internet on American elections in 2006. That was published by, I can't remember, but big publisher. And
MIT Press.
That's right, MIT Press. And Steve had the TiddlyWiki notes hosted on MIT's server as well, which was great for TiddlyWiki. And Steve's gone on to make a number of hypertext courses based on TiddlyWiki. And his philosophy is to make those course materials open and available to everybody. And so that's also a really nice fit, because one of the things about Fission at the back end is there's an opportunity to well, you don't pay for the infrastructure in the same way. So it seems as though it's a very low cost for the university to keep it open in an interactive sense for a bunch of other students outside the university. Sorry, badly explained. But yes, thanks, Steve. Welcome.
And Abraham actually has a comment to make there that says, Rome research has been dominating attention in the academic world. We should work to change that. There's fertile ground for growth in the emerging world as far as academic attention is concerned. So totally agree. I think Rome research is the elephant in the room of hypertext and knowledge graphs right now. Fission has been a locus of interest for a lot of these open source tools in the same way that without kind of centralized SaaS infrastructure, they want to enable everyone to sync notes. So we're hosting further tech talks. We've got on April 8th, we've got a discussion with LogSec coming up. So I encourage people to come along and check that out as well. And much like TiddlyWiki, they have this concept of like different saver backends. So they're using GitHub right now, but they understand that that's a lot of barrier to entry. They use a Chrome only ability of using your desktop file system API, which is pretty super cool. And because their app is local first. Also reminds me of, Steve, do you know Reclaim Hosting? Oh, okay. So they're longtime ed tech folks who work with a lot of universities. I used to run a lot of the early blogging conferences and worked a lot with ed tech folks. I think explaining how perhaps an open source engine for your academic notes or student notes and the importance of that versus something like Rome is something in there. I really, really love that teaching hypertextual writing. I think that what it immediately made me think of is we don't tend to see a lot of writing anymore that says, click here, where click here is the link with no alt text, right? So it is a skill that I think can be learned, and this sort of hypernotes is another part of that.
So yeah, the universities are such strange creatures. We're afraid of open source software because we don't know where it's going to go. We don't know if it's going to be there. We don't know if it's going to last the semester. So we want to pay for things. Yeah. And it makes us nervous when they're free. As Jeremy and I found, it's crazy.
And I've seen some of the software that Steve's organization pays for, and it's your sort of worst nightmare expense systems from 1998, sort of remade as education systems. But I'd love to just pick up one point about Rome that I think is germane to this discussion, which is I love the fact that Rome and all these things exist, and there's it makes a fantastic fertile world, and there's a kind of family tree that Rome was first prototyped by Connor on TiddlyWiki, in fact. So there's a nice relationship there. And his choice is to make Rome be a commercial service, VC-backed commercial service, which is great, and it's that enables them to offer the service in the way that they do. Although I must be very careful. I believe actually that that their revenues, I think they're doing very well in terms of revenues, because they've successfully charged a premium price to some users. But the point about the mass market services like that, commercial services, is that they can't support customization, not at scale. So you saw that with Twitter. In the early days of Twitter, they had an API and it was a playground and you could do what you like. And right now, Rome wasn't at first, but it is now the same thing. They've got an ecosystem of plugins and so on. But the economics of what they're doing guarantee that they won't be able to offer, well, sorry, my prediction is that they won't be able to offer that customization were they to attain the scale that they probably deserve, given the the very, very positive reception that they've had. So to me, that's the reason to use TiddlyWiki, is this, the long-term safety, the physics of the situation about TiddlyWiki isn't going to change. Even if I became deranged and made it closed source, it already exists as an open source project and it will remain so in perpetuity. So there's a different kind of confidence that you can have with a product like TiddlyWiki. And I know that makes it hard to approach and hard to use in some contexts. But that's exactly why it's so fantastic to be working on Fission, which is, as I was saying earlier, the whole process of getting up and running from a standing start with a TiddlyWiki on Fission is the smoothest process we've had anywhere for TiddlyWiki. So, best of both worlds.
I'm sorry I've missed the early demo days of Fission because I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. And what else? And I've been, like as Jeremy said, I've been playing in TiddlyWiki for a while, so I'll probably get it maybe quickly. But what does it do?
So I think Boris just dropped, so I'll he's having computer trouble, so I'll jump in for him. So Fission is a developer platform, right? So we have app publishing, right? So as Jeremy's using, right, tiddlywiki.fission.app is an app published on our platform. And we also have a software developer kit. So we allow you to create users securely without passwords. And then we have what we call the web native file system, which is this offline first file hosting, right? So that's how with TiddlyWiki, we're able to save files, publish files, and make them publicly available on the web. So yeah, that's the high level thing, but obviously happy to answer.
From a TiddlyWiki perspective, Steve, it's basically Dropbox with what we used to call TiddlyWiki in the sky for Dropbox built in, and no passwords. Yeah. So that's this rather freaky thing about the way it, unusual, unorthodox way in which your credentials are stored in a browser and you can authorize other browsers at will. So in my case, my credentials are spread around 3 different machines and 4 different browsers, which keeps things safe.
Yeah. So we use like built-in browser technology to generate public-private key pairs, right? So secure keys that don't require you to remember a password, right? So once you create your account, you have these keys in your browser, and as Jeremy said, you can link other browsers, other devices, to that same account, and then. Yeah, and then those browsers are just logged into your account.
So for those of you on iOS, if you've had the experience of working with an iPhone and multiple Mac devices, you will often on login get these prompts and say, oh, do you want to allow this other login? So that's what we've modeled some of this stuff on. It's not terribly familiar on the web. So we're almost using browser as operating system here. And so a lot of the conceptual pieces are stuff where we need to do work and explanation and screenshots and so on, so people feel more comfortable with it. But that's what we're trying. Abraham, and sorry, I had my entire computer decided that it wanted to reboot. So I'm glad it didn't wreck the system. Are there any memory space constraints in terms of cost? How do you prevent freeloading abuse? So it is an account-based system. They are these interesting portable accounts. So Fission has carefully selected both the standards that it uses and its technology stack to be portable. So as an example, one of the things that could be done if a university decided that they wanted to roll out Fission accounts to an entire university. they could run an entire Fission constellation. So instead of Fission.app and Fission.name for user accounts, they could have, university app and university name, and hand that out to all students. And of course, this works for businesses as well. So we're running one big constellation, but it's all open source software, so we should see lots of these. We will have paid accounts with premium features. Again, going back to the iOS or Apple model, end users can pay for more storage. So Fission intends to have premium accounts. And then, our main customer is in fact developers who are building apps for others. So premium developer features where people pay. And we really see it as both, because the developer doesn't have to pay, maintain, or back up storage, because each user brings their own account storage. We'll give everybody a decent amount with TiddlyWiki and how small it is just being text. There should likely be a free tier, but we'll encourage everyone to pay for premium accounts, because that's how you get to be as sustainable as a business. No, Steve, no university has done that yet. We're pretty early in these things. We're having also discussions with things like healthcare. The way that Fission's private mode works, it's entirely encrypted and quite secure. So we have no GDPR concerns or anything else like that, because the data is literally, there's no export. Any app that you attach to your Fission account, it's just the data is stored in your own account. How much space? I have not yet determined how much space one gets in the free tier. I will say that I'm thinking somewhere between 500 megs and 2 gigs. It will likely be less generous than others on purpose, because the value these days isn't really in bulk storage in any case. It's having this entire system. Or even thinking about things like, if you want, obviously things that really take up lots of space are stuff like video. And if you want to store lots of that stuff, you're probably going to want to have some other features around it. So that's what we're thinking about right now. And in fact, we have an OpenCollective for Fission itself. So before building out a bunch of payment stuff, we have a handful of people paying. And I just checked and I got the notification. Walt, thank you. You're the first TiddlyWiki on Fission backer. Amazing.
Thank you, Walt. Yeah, that's good.
Any other questions that we want to cover? Comments? Please go ahead, Steve.
Oh, I don't have a comment. I've just got to say thank you. I have to run for a 12 o'clock that I'm going to be late for, but this was the best 20 minutes of my day and of my week and probably of my month. So thank you so much for dragging me out of my administrative hell into thinking about TiddlyWiki again, which is really joyful. So
amazing. Have a great day, Steve.
Jeremy, I will catch up with you as we owe each other a talk, I'm sure.
Cool. I'll speak to you later, Steve.
Yep, thanks.
Cheers. Yeah, Steve's the provost, I think. Is that right, Steve? Of Senior University. So he's slightly underselling himself as an administrative functionary.
Yes, exactly. Well, amazing. Anything else that people want to cover live while we've got you? Cognizant of people's time. Jeremy and I are both long talkers.
I've got something I'd love to show for 30 seconds that I don't think I've shown on one of these talks, but I would understand if you
go for it. Go for it.
For years, this has been my go-to example of the kind of TiddlyWiki app that I would like to engender. And it's old, it's 2015, and it's somebody who made a way of teaching high school volleyball, which I had no idea that there's so much to it. But you can, and I don't really understand this application at all, but you can see there's a whole load of stuff, some of which is sort of bits of the body with stuff that you can read, some of which is colored stuff, and you can add more stuff. And I think in the process, I'm making cues and cards to help me teach volleyball. And this obviously was made by somebody who was both reasonably skilled at TiddlyWiki stuff and knew volleyball. And they've done an amazing job. And I always feel that success for TiddlyWiki will be, one dimension of success will be when things like this have enough of a business model. Because I think right now the world doesn't really have a plausible path to turn this into a business. You know, making a very specific high school volleyball teaching aid. I can imagine the VCs wouldn't get excited about that, and yet it's a really worthwhile thing to do. And I assume if you're a high school volleyball teacher, this would be a really useful starting point for building your own app that reflected your own way of teaching. So for me, that's when I think of these little nano applications built by dedicated individuals and groups who are specialized in a particular domain and supported by the TiddlyWiki community in building tools that, you know, uniquely address the problems of that domain. And who knew that these were the problems of high school volleyball? So there you go. Sorry, almost 30 seconds.
Amazing, amazing, awesome. Okay, we'll wrap it up there. Thank you, everyone, for coming and attending. Thank you, Jeremy, for the demo.
Thank you.